If you're seeking a spaciously compact, prestigiously badged, premium 5-door hatchback, then you're probably thinking diesel power and German badge work. Here's a different way to go. Lexus's much improved first generation CT200H petrol-electric hybrid. The original version of this car needed a little perfecting, but it's now a far more credible choice that's classy to own, efficient to run, and kinder to the environment. Maybe it's my imagination, but I can't help thinking that the drive towards diesel power is losing just a touch of its momentum these days. True, the vast majority of European buyers still continue to prefer to fuel from the black pump, but to some extent that's only because affordable alternatives to the high running costs of conventional petrol power are still quite limited. In the current market, Lexus alone takes an undiluted stand against the diesel revolution, with petrol-electric hybrid technology that since 2010 has reached down into the premium compact hatchback segment with this car, the CT200H. So, why does the Mark feel the need to be different? Well, quite apart from the fact that it has to be to break into the German brand-dominated prestige market, the company recognises a disconnect between the eco-minded claims of diesel engines and their rumbling, smoke-belching reality. You might think that by driving a diesel model with its impressive fuel consumption and low CO2 returns, you're doing your bit for the planet. The reality, though, is that you're pumping harmful NOx gases into the atmosphere with toxicity that'll increase as your engine's diesel particulate filter becomes more and more clogged. Until all-electric power becomes more viable, a hybrid engine is the best alternative the motor industry can offer to this scenario, technology pioneered by Lexus's parent company, Toyota. Toyota it was who founded the drive towards hybrid power with their Prius at the turn of the century, a car now developed through 3 generations into an impressive, if rather uninspiring confection, powered by a 98 brake horsepower 1.8 litre VVTi petrol engine, aided by an 81 brake horsepower electric motor. Taking that package and rebranding it with a bit of extra Lexus polish was an obvious next step for the Japanese corporation to take. Hence this CT, the letters standing for Compact Tourer, which is Lexus speak for the class of premium small hatchback you'll hopefully recognise when I talk of models like Audi's A3, BMW's 1 Series, Mercedes A-Class, maybe even Alfa Romeo's Giulietta. Cars that are no bigger than something Focus or Astra-sized, but sit a world apart when it comes to perceived driveway cred. Of course, Lexus was never going to make much of an impact on rivals of this quality by simply playing the green card and slapping shinier badge work on a Prius. Owners in this segment tend to be younger and want a more dynamic drive. So the CT200H development team tried to give it to them, but went a bit too far, creating a car with an over-firm ride that put people off. There were also objections to the quirky styling and the thrashy CVT auto gearbox, that transmission hardly helping refinement standards that weren't very Lexus-like. Underneath all of these issues, though, lay a very effective piece of automotive design that, with a little extra finesse, might exactly suit the prevailing economic mood in this segment. This, we're told, is exactly what's provided by the much improved CT200H model we're going to look at here, announced early in 2014. Let's put it to the test. If you're still not familiar with the hybrid driving experience, a bit of adjustment will be needed, but not too much. Press the start button and the virtual silence is very different from the ugly, grumbly diesel note delivered by this car's competitors. That's because from start-up to speeds of up to 25 miles an hour, or for very short distances, this car, in theory anyway, is supposed to automatically operate in EV mode, under electric power alone. To illustrate the point, a plug-in lithium-ion battery-powered Toyota Prius is about 50% pricier than one with nickel metal hydride cells, though that's nevertheless a premium you might think wealthier CT200H buyers could be interested in considering. Lexus thinks not. I mention the Prius because it provides virtually all the mechanicals for this car's hybrid drive system, there to mate that battery with a 98 brake horsepower 1.8 litre VVTi petrol engine, an 81 brake horsepower electric motor, a power control unit and a power split device. The two outputs I've mentioned are never delivered at the same time, which is why, slightly confusingly, the total power output of this model is quoted at 134 brake horsepower. It's a clever, proven setup, and the fact that it allows you to run independently on either battery or petrol power, as well as using the two things in tandem, sets it apart from lower tech hybrids like those Honda used to make, where the power sources could only ever work together. That's the theory, anyway. The reality, though, is that the feeble electric-only maximum speed restricts EV use to urban stop-start traffic. And even there, I found that the engine requires very little encouragement to chip into proceedings. You stand a better chance of staying solely in milk float mode if you press an EV button on the centre console that, with a restrained throttle, will leave you gliding silently along until the power charge is spent at the end of your operating range. That's provided, of course, that the battery is kept fully charged up by the engine, a process you can help with by increasing the amount of energy the car reclaims through regenerative braking. To optimise that, you've only to remember to snick the neat, stubby gear stick of the 6-speed CVT automatic gearbox that all CT200H models must have from D into B. When it is time for the petrol engine to cut in, the transition is almost seamless, so it's helpful to be able to monitor things via this neat energy flow monitor on the dash there to show you what's being charged or being driven by what. Once you're up and running with battery and petrol power chipping in and out, Lexus says that the CT200H has been engineered to perform in two driving moods: relaxing or dynamic, depending on the setting you choose from this center drive controller. Should you be feeling laid back, you'll probably have the control set to normal, by which the petrol engine will take over from the electric motor as and when needed. But given that you're not in a hurry, it might just be better to switch to eco mode, where throttle openings are reduced and the aircon system optimized to save fuel. Driving in this way suits this car's character best. But you'll also be wanting to know about this Lexus's dynamic repertoire, and maybe also the difference that might be made by switching to the last, most purposeful sport setting. This is, after all, a car that must compete with agile Audi A3s and brawny BMW 1 Series models, which is a tough ask for a rebodied Toyota Prius, never designed for such antics, even if in this case it does sit on a more sophisticated platform. Especially since all CTs must use a resolutely unsporting 6-speed CVT automatic gearbox that even on this F-Sport model lacks trendy paddle shifters. Still, click over to the Sport setting and this CT does its best, switching the instrument cluster backlighting from blue to red and transforming the hybrid power indicator on the dash into a rev counter in an attempt to match your mood. More importantly, this mode delivers an extra 150 volts of extra electric motor power to enable a rest to 62 mph sprint time of 10.3 seconds as engine revs are held longer, throttle and steering response sharpened, and the traction and stability control systems rendered less intrusive. That's actually a little quicker than directly comparable diesel models like BMW's 116D or Audi's A3 1.6 TDI. It all sounds quite promising, especially as it's matched by a brilliant, low-set, cockpit-like driving position and firm, supportive, sporty seats. However, it was from this point on that the issues with the original version of this car began to kick in. In an attempt to distance this Lexus from its Prius donor model, the engineers saddled the earlier version of this CT200H with a rather over-firm set of suspension responses, resulting in ride quality so firm it could sometimes verge on being unpleasant. Nor was the car itself as quiet as its near-silent hybrid power plant, an issue exacerbated by a thrashy CVT auto gearbox that sent revs shooting skywards every time it was required to shift out of its comfort zone. It was all very un-Lexus-like. Fortunately, a package of small but significant changes have made quite a difference with this facelifted version. A program of spot welding, mostly around the tailgate, has improved body rigidity enough for the suspension spring rates to be loosened up a bit without sacrificing the neat, precise cornering demeanour that the few driving enthusiasts prepared to consider this car wouldn't want to lose. The result is a more absorbent ride that you can further improve by exchanging the standard 17-inch wheels fitted to most models for the optionally smaller 16-inch rims. Ride quality can be further enhanced if you're able to stretch to this F-Sport variant, which comes as standard with clever lateral body dampers intended to filter out structural shocks from the body shell. Of course, the extent of this CT200H model's dynamic imperfections couldn't be changed overnight. Vague steering and that lethargic CVT gearbox are just two of the reasons why it can't match its German rivals through the twisty stuff. You'll find the brakes a bit sharp too, to begin with. To be fair, few of these drawbacks will manifest themselves on the smooth motorway journeys that will probably occupy owners across the majority of their mileage. It's here that the light steering becomes a boon rather than a drawback, and it's here too that you can revel in the beautiful cabin and peerless refinement, now improved with no fewer than 94 detailed sound deadening measures. Plus, transmission recalibrations have reduced the gearbox's thrashiness. In other words, this model's more of a Lexus these days, more of the kind of car you'd want and expect it to be. It is perhaps appropriate for a car that offers something different to look a little different. That was always Lexus's perspective when discussion turned to the quirky design of the original version of this model. The problem for them is, though, that buyers in the premium segment are a notoriously conservative bunch, hence the need for aesthetic changes made to this revised first-generation CT200H, offering a much stronger visual link to pricier, more established offerings in the Lexus lineup. Primarily, that means the adoption of the brand's now familiar spindle-shaped grille at the front with smart mesh inserts in this more purposeful-looking F-Sport version. Otherwise, the so-called L-finesse design language remains much as before, with the 5-door hatchback body style necessary to differentiate this car from Lexus's sharp, shapely, but unfortunately much more expensive IS Saloon, still offering the same distinctive silhouette thanks to its steeply raked windscreen and long flowing roofline. Now, I remarked in our original film that it was a shape that could benefit from a little L-finessing, and that's exactly what's happened here, with smaller, sleeker door mirrors, nicer alloy wheel designs for the 15, 16 or 17-inch wheels, a smart shark fin style roof antennae, a revised rear bumper that's been set 20mm lower, and a more prominent rear spoiler for this F-Sport variant. You'd be pleased to have it in your driveway, but without the badge work, I still think the neighbours might wonder what you'd bought. But you won't be worrying very much about their opinions once you take a seat behind the wheel. Lexus does interiors exceptionally well, and this one's still good enough to embarrass direct German rivals. The equipment-adjusted price saving you'll enjoy over a BMW 1 Series or an Audi A3 may well feel that you can afford to specify leather, and if you do so, you'll find that the hide is tactile and beautifully finished. It's complemented by aluminium inserts, satin wood finishing, and carefully crafted soft-touch plastics. And I love this brilliantly supportive 6 or 8-way adjustable seat, the cockpit style feel of the low set, perfectly sighted driving position, and the way that all the controls fall neatly to hand and operate with a quality click. As before, the dashboard is divided into two sections, an upper display zone with an 8-inch LCD multi-display screen and a lower operation zone where you'll find the gear stick and various system controls. I personally quite like this mouse-style controller that operates the infotainment system and its various functions. But for those objecting to it, Lexus now offers a lower grade navigation setup with a circular BMW iDrive style dial. Either way, the controller sits exactly where the handbrake would be had it not been replaced by a dashboard button and a rather awkward foot pedal. As for rear seat room, well, if you're tempted to complain, then you clearly haven't sat in the back of a rival BMW 1 Series, Mercedes A-Class or Audi A3 very recently. Though it suffers from a high waistline which restricts the airiness of the cabin somewhat, this Lexus offers slightly more passenger space than any of these cars, with comfortable room for 2 adults, as long as they're not too tall, and space for 3 at a pinch. But I haven't yet touched upon practicality, something you'd expect to be compromised by the need to find somewhere to stow the hybrid system's nickel metal hydride battery pack. As it turns out, clever packaging of this unit between the rear wheels means that it takes up relatively little boot space, or at least it does before you fold down the 60/40 split folding rear bench. Once you do that, the 985 litre cargo bay provided is the smallest in the segment. The space occupied by that nickel metal hydride battery has to tell somewhere. Fortunately for Lexus though, it doesn't significantly impinge on the main boot area. Indeed, the 375 litre luggage bay is pretty much as large as you get in a rival Audi A3 Sportback. A bit more than you get in BMW's 1 Series, and a lot more than you get in other competitors like Mercedes A-Class or Volvo's V40. You get a wide range of trim levels with this improved CT200H, but as before, they all embellish one essential package that gives you a 5-door body style and an automatic-only petrol-electric hybrid power plant offering a combined 134 brake horsepower output. Now, prices range in the £27,000 to £30,000 bracket, and at the bottom of the range there's a freshly added S variant that's even cheaper than a comparable Toyota Prius and comes with smaller 15-inch alloy wheels that help towards better running costs. At the other end of the scale though, paying around £30,000 for a top Premier version of this car would be hard to justify, given that the same kind of money would buy you a hybrid version of the next vehicle up in the Lexus model range, the stylish IS Saloon, with nearly twice as much power in hybrid form. Does the same argument apply if you're thinking of spending around £27,000 on this smartly turned out F-Sport C2 variant? Well, perhaps, but the sleeker look and lateral damping system of this version might tempt me if I was offered the right deal on one. So what kind of value proposition does overall pricing for this Lexus represent in the premium compact market segment? Take an initial glance at the price lists, and if you're looking at the bottom of the CT200H range, you might think that you'd be paying the same kind of money for one of these as you would for the direct German diesel alternatives, namely Audi's A3 Sportback 1.6 TDI 110, BMW's 116D and Mercedes A180 CDI Eco. But that of course ignores the fact that for a direct like-for-like comparison with this Lexus, you need to be looking at all these rivals in automatic form, which then of course makes them at least £1,500 more expensive. If you widen your search to include Volvo's V40 in D2 115 guise, it's the same story, and a diesel automatic Alfa Romeo Giulietta would cost you even more. Lexus also contends that a CT is better equipped than all of these alternatives. Are there other realistic options? Well, not many in this segment. If you were prepared to consider a chunky crossover, Peugeot's diesel-electric Hybrid 4 model might be an option at around £27,000. If you are prepared to go the all-electric route with its restricted driving range, a £25,000 budget would buy you Volkswagen's all-electric e-Golf. Then there are more sophisticated plug-in petrol-electric hybrid models to consider. The Golf GTE and the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV at just under the £30,000 mark, and the Toyota Prius plug-in and Audi A3 e-tron models at just above that price point. Ultimately, it all depends just how sophisticated and green-minded you really want to be. I can understand, though, if, having considered all of that, you conclude that an affordable CT200H variant does just enough to save the planet without too many restrictions on your comfort, your lifestyle or your purse. Should that be the case, you'll be wanting to know how generous Lexus has been with the standard spec. And the answer is that even on the base spec variant, the kit list is pretty reasonable. So you can expect to find alloy wheels, LED illumination for the daytime running lights and tail lamps, rain sensing wipers, power folding heated mirrors, a rear spoiler, a push button starter, dual zone climate control, the driving mode system, the Lexus media display with remote dial control, Bluetooth phone compatibility, a leather trimmed steering wheel from which you can control a 6-speaker stereo with a DAB tuner, an aux-in socket and 2 USB ports, plus hill assist control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. Further up the range, satellite navigation is either standard or at extra cost, there being two options here: the straightforward Lexus navigation setup and the ritzier Lexus premium navigation system. That's the one fitted to this car, which includes a remote touch interface controller and more sophisticated features for improved journey planning and onboard connectivity. Now, these include access to connected services via a compatible smartphone, as well as the ability to send route information to your vehicle from an enabled computer, tablet or smartphone, ecological route guidance, access to Google Street View and multilingual voice recognition. The package is also Wi-Fi ready and includes a reversing camera plus a GPS controlled clock. Beyond that, plush variants include niceties like leather trim, cruise control and parking sensors, while this F-Sport model gets, amongst other things, a body kit, special dark finish 17-inch alloy wheels, aluminium pedals, an F-Sport leather steering wheel, sport suspension and the desirable lateral damping system. Safety-wise, a 5-star Euro NCAP showing is justified by the inclusion of no fewer than 8 airbags, including knee protection for driver and passenger. Plus, of course, it goes without saying that the CT has the full complement of electronic braking, stability and traction controls, plus anti-whiplash head restraints and a tyre pressure warning system. You'll need to pay extra, though, for Lexus's PCS preemptive pre-crash safety system, which radar monitors the road ahead to detect potential hazards. Should one threaten, it will alert the driver, pre-tension the safety belts and automatically help with braking. The system comes packaged with Lexus's ACC adaptive cruise control, which uses the same gadgetry to maintain a safe distance to the car in front. Cost of ownership is where the CT200H can really hurt its conventionally powered rivals. True, you'll need to take the official combined consumption figures with a pinch of salt. For the record, we're talking 78.5 miles to the gallon for the base S model with its smaller 15-inch wheels, and 68.9 miles to the gallon across all other variants. Lexus may be able to achieve these returns by initially creeping along at under 25 miles an hour on an industry test track until the full electric-only driving range is used up, but try that in the real world and you get a queue of angry motorists behind you. Having said that, Lexus's best figure does outstrip its diesel competitors by over 10%, despite this car being the weight of a portly passenger, heavier than one of those. As a result, if you remember to choose the Eco setting on the driving mode controller, that'll make you put up with restricted throttle response, your real world returns shouldn't be too far off what you get in a black pump fueled rival. And of course, you'll be filling up more cheaply from the green pump. Look at automatic diesel rivals for comparison, and you'll find that a BMW 116D manages 68.9 miles to the gallon, Mercedes A180 CDI Eco manages 70.6 miles to the gallon, and the Audi A3 Sportback 1.6 TDI and Volvo V40 D2 both return 72.4 miles to the gallon. The CT200H's case looks even better when you come to consider CO2 emissions, rated at 82 grams per kilometre for the entry-level S model with its 15-inch wheels, 88 grams per kilometre for models with 16-inch wheels, and 94 grams per kilometre for variants with 17-inch wheels. In comparison, none of the automatic diesel rivals I've just mentioned can break the 100 grams per kilometre barrier, so all will cost significantly more to tax. In fact, a CT200H company car tax rating of just 11% could see you making BIK savings of up to 50% over what you'd pay to run some diesel rivals. Lexus reckons that these savings could add up to as much as £2,827 over 3 years. On top of that, there's no annual road tax disc to buy and no London congestion charge to pay if you venture into the capital. Companies will be able to avoid the 10% tax surcharge applied to diesel vehicles and claim a 100% write-down against corporation tax. As for the real eco stuff, NOx emissions are way down on what you'd be smoking out at the wheel of a diesel. They're rated either at 3.3 mg per kilometre when the engine's going, and of course are reduced to 0 when you're driving in EV all-electric mode. On top of that, this car uses energy-efficient air conditioning and LED lighting, plus plenty of biomaterials too. Even the stereo speaker diaphragms do their bit, made out of bamboo charcoal. Servicing is every year or 100,000 miles, whichever comes first, which doesn't sound especially noteworthy. But when your car does return to the dealership, it'll certainly help that the Lexus hybrid drive system has low maintenance requirements built in. So there's no starter motor or alternator to go wrong, no drive belts to break, a maintenance-free timing chain, no particulate filter to get clogged up with diesel fumes, and of course, thanks to the CVT Auto gearbox, no clutch either. The hybrid drive system has a good record for minimising tyre wear too, and its battery will last the life of the car. Plus, the regenerative braking system helps extend the life of the brake pads. Over 60,000 miles of driving, the front pad should only need replacing once, while the rear pads and all discs will probably last the full distance. The parallel hybrid technology employed here might be fairly conventional. We're on the cusp of a transition to plug-in lithium-ion batteries, but that's probably a good thing, as it's fully proven, over 60 billion kilometres of driving worldwide, and in any case is protected by a 5-year, 60,000-mile warranty. Residual values aren't quite as strong as those of German rivals, but a percentage figure after 3 years in the low 40s isn't too bad. Insurance groups range between 19 and 21. You can't fault the way that Lexus has listened to criticism of the original version of this car and responded by ruthlessly sorting through its issues. The old rock-hard ride is now softened thanks to the way that the chassis stiffening process has freed up the spring rates. Attention to detail has at last made the car as refined as the engine that drives it. The gearbox revs no longer rocket quite so vociferously skywards when you stamp on the throttle. The quirky looks have a bit more universal appeal, and it's even a bit cheaper to buy. That last bit's quite important, I think. Essentially, a CT200H costs no more than the Toyota Prius it remains fundamentally based upon, yet offers extra quality, a more involving drive, and the higher residual values of the prestigious Lexus brand. So, why do media writers who consistently praise the Prius still disparage its Lexus stablemate? There was some logic in their arguments with the original version of this model. Now the critics need to wake up and see this car for what it's become, a refreshingly different and very viable option in the premium compact market. They probably won't though, for motoring magazines tend to champion cars with cutting-edge driving dynamics, an area that remains far from this car's comfort zone, even with its F-Sport trimmings. Out here in the real world though, life is a bit different. The typical middle management executive wants refinement, low running costs and a prestigious quality feel. And if he or she can get all of that bound up in a properly eco-friendly package, then so much the better. In offering all of these things, the CT200H makes an awful lot of sense if you're fed up with the default German choices in this segment. If your Lexus dealer can persuade you to try one, you may well find it a compelling package on the balance sheet and in your driveway.